All right. All right. Hello, everyone. We're so glad you're here. I'm Kristen Moran. I am so honored to be able to play host for these Faber Night School sessions. Thank you for having me. If I haven't met many of you, I am a longtime fan of the Faber Institute, and Father Gans has blessed our little community here in Southeast Portland many times, and yeah, just it's a privilege to be a part of things. And I'm just excited to be here with all of you. And this is one of the oldest habits of the Faber Institute. And all the recordings from previous sessions are available on the website if something really grabbed your spirit and you want to revisit, or if you're new and you want to see what's happened in the past. So you can just go on the website and find the whole library. And each of these sessions will be distinct, so you don't have to worry if you missed one. They don't build on each other. There's no quiz.
Yeah.
Just show up and be present, and they're all individual and richly unique. So we're so grateful that each of you are here, and um, we I just look forward to getting to know a little bit of you through these sessions. And this is our time to do the work of souls and to slow down, markedly change the pace from our busy days, and open up a window to the outside breeze of depth and beauty from the Holy Spirit.
Mm.
So we hope to delve into an unknown space together. And this is also an exciting night. We're starting series 17, and we're going to switch to or kind of upgrade to a longer format. So there'll be 90 minutes total. And Father Gans will speak, and then there'll be a short break, and then we'll wrap up right at 7:30. Um, I'll do my best to make everyone muted so we can just focus on Father Gans, but then during our break, you can unmute yourself and feel free to um, join in on a conversation. Have I missed anything?
Christian, you did great. I swear to God. The check is in the mail. Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you. I think you got it.
Okay, great.
So why don't you mute everybody and I'll unmute myself.
Okay.
Okay.
We good? Okay.
Yeah. Can y'all hear me okay? Just wave. Okay, wonderful. Well, welcome. It's so nice to see you. Series 17, it's the fall. The only way I notice the autumn is coming is it's so dark in the morning when I get up, some like 5:45. It's just pitch black, and it wasn't like that a few weeks ago. So autumn is my favorite season. I have an autumn soul, and so I'm happy to be beginning this series with you in a series that will include three Johns. John the Evangelist, John Chrysostom, and John Henry Newman. Um, and really, the choosing of this, I was led to by the fact that the last John, St. John Henry Newman of the 19th century, one of the greatest of the churchmen coming out of the British Isles, will be proclaimed a doctor of the church, the first one in this century to join the ranks of just like 36 of the greatest teachers and holy people of 2000 years. 36 people. That's pretty rare air. So the first doctor of the church is John the Evangelist. And we're going to, I'd like to invite you in by acknowledging first that this is September. And if you're acute and alert about such matters, you know, sept in Latin means seven, as in the seventh month. But you kind of go, wait a minute, this is the ninth month. You always write 9 before when you're in September. So what the confusion? Well, in the time when the calendar was set, January and February did not exist. It was called the winter and nothing happened. So the new year started on March 1st. So that's why there's an offset of 2 months, and why September then is September when it's actually the ninth month on our calendar. Fun fact for family and friends. It's also today the feast of St. Peter Claver, S.J., who was known for going as a Jesuit from Spain to Cartagena in Colombia during the intense activity of the slave trade and the Middle Passage of slaves coming from Africa. And were you aware that that trade from Africa to Europe and the New World lasted for 400 years? For 400 years, we were kidnapping Black people from Africa and transporting them in the most brutal conditions, like chicken farms where you just ram them into these cages, put them right on top, and carry them to the new 400 years. And on the other side of Africa, going into the Islamic world, that slave trade has gone later. That's 1,000 years old. Amazing. But St. Peter Claver was a Jesuit who went and deliberately went in towards the slaves onto the boats where they had just arrived, feeling terrified, nearly dead, and just blessing them and trying to just be present and to show courtesy and and dignity towards them. His feast day is today. So let me take a moment to pray through his intercession, a way of Catholics of practicing the communion of saints. So we'll say a prayer to God, but we'll ask as if in friendship, a saint to help us in the prayer. That's the idea. So let me just offer this prayer that the Lord will bless our gathering tonight. Come, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, help us, as Kristen has invited, to enter a different kind of space that actually we can't make, but you can. Through your Holy Spirit, changing our level of presence to deeper things. Please bless us with presence to whatever wish you used to make of us tonight. And through the intercession of St. Peter Claver, help us to know your faithful servant, John, the apostle, better, and through knowing him better, know you better. Amen. I'd like to begin with you by not assuming too much, but I'd like to just say something about how a gospel, any gospel, has managed to be what it is. So, in the development of our understanding of God in the tradition, the Judeo-Christian tradition that we're talking about, there is always the primacy of an experience of God so intense and so clear that those who have that experience are unable to doubt it. And we're good at doubting. Humans are good at doubting. There's a good kind of doubt, which is to be discerning and careful and to weigh everything and don't assume that every experience that seems like God is from God. So we want discretion and carefulness, but we don't want doubt in the sense of it was right in front of your face. It couldn't be clearer in your inner life that God has just really touched you. We don't want to doubt that, because that's the one thing in all knowledge of God that we're sure of. that on that day, at that time, this happened in my life. And the clarity of that is what allows me to weigh other experiences, whether they're true or not. You see what I'm saying? So at the beginning of the Christian tradition was an experience of God and of Jesus Christ in particular that was so intense, so unstoppable, so overwhelming. And that was his passion and death and resurrection. It both shattered those who had believed in him and followed him, literally just undid them and tore them apart, both as a group with each other, but their insides. If you've ever lost someone through a violence or a sudden tear, it just tears you apart inside. So they went from that, and the world won. It ran the table, and Christ and everything about him was obliterated. And 2 days later, oh my gosh, the women have come and told us that they met him and he's alive. Oh my, just the jolt, the intensity of those different experiences is the experience that is at the foundation of the writing of the Gospels. So, one of the things that we must understand that a gospel is not primarily teaching. What it wants to do is to cause you to have an experience of God. And the gospel is the means by which these four authors seek to reach us and invite us into an experience of Jesus that they had, in hopes that you will, through what they say, have a similar experience. At the core of all true religious teaching about God are certain experiences that the church has had and that those who follow in the tradition have also had of Christ and of God through the Holy Spirit. So part of trying to understand how each of the gospel writers wrote what they did, and part of what we're going to try to do in coming to know John today, is there were certain ways he experienced Christ that was different than the other gospel writers. There were certain things that got to him that he never forgot, that exploded his understanding of God. And you see it in the way he writes his gospel. And he wants to bring you and me into that understanding. Okay? So, first, there's an experience. The next level of Christian understanding is a Greek word characterized in the tradition. It's called the kerygma. Keyrygma. If you're thinking of having a child, I would recommend that you not name that child Kerygma. People just wouldn't understand, even though it's a very good word. And what it means is when we have these experiences so true and so beautiful, we want to talk about it to somebody. We want to share it, not neutrally. It's not okay with us when we share these things that mean so much. It's not okay to us to be dull and boring in how we talk about it. We want to share persuasively, that people join us. That's called the kerygma, and it's at the foundation of what would eventually become the creed. What are the key elements of the story of God, of Jesus? What do you remember? I remember this. It's the gathering of the stories. Now, one of the things that's challenging about kerygma, or proclamation, that is, sharing your experiences of God, is that it takes time to learn how to tell a story well. we're not just naturally good at telling our story. And if you hear other people's story, people that you know pretty well, you often notice that they leave things out that shouldn't be left out because you know it's true about them. And either they just don't believe it or they've forgotten it. But you who love them, remember it. So you want to say, you know, you really should include this because that's an important thing, part of your story. See what I'm saying? So the thing about story is that it has a vividness, a relationality to it. But how to tell the story well, and then to know what the story means takes practice. And so what our church did, the Christian church did, was instead of picking among, let's say, the four gospels and saying, we like this one best, we're going to go with this one. Our church deliberately chose four gospels so that the tension of the telling in all four would kind of correct the limitations of each particular telling and enrich. Just like if someone were going to tell your story or talk about you, they would only see certain aspects of you. But if you were with three other people and everyone was talking about you, it's a much richer take on the reality of you. An example, this happens all the time at funerals, where the one we love is now gone. And those who are bereaved are startled at how many show up. You're just so touched by that. They actually, look who came. And over the course of the funeral and the things around it, you, as the bereaved, are hearing stories you never knew about this person you love. It's like, I knew them, but not even close to not enough. That's the idea of four gospels and the genius of why the church did that. And in the early church, there was an effort by one particular learned Christian man to say, let's just put all these together into one story. And the church rejected it, thought it was an interesting experiment. But no, we're going with the four tellings because Christ will find him there better. And that's proven true. So today we're going to concentrate on just one gospel. Now, to get a sense of John's voice and how um, in intensely he reaches toward you and me, and he's saying, I don't want you to think of the Jesus event as a powerful, transformative idea. I don't want to allow that. I want you to know my friend, someone more beloved to me than anyone I've met. And you hear it in the concreteness, pushing past the idea of God or the idea of Jesus or redemption as an idea and getting to the person. Here's what he says in the first letter of John, right off the bat. Listen to this. Something which has existed since the beginning, which we have heard, which we have seen with our own eyes, which we have watched and touched with our own hands. I will never, ever forget when Jesus touched my face once with his hands. I've never forgotten that feel. He's saying we actually touched him, heard him breathing. The word of life, this is our theme. That life was made visible. We saw it and are giving our testimony. That's the kerygma. We can't help but tell you about him, declaring to you the eternal life which was present to the Father and has been revealed to us. We are declaring to you what we have seen and heard. And why? So that you too may share our life. Our life is shared with the Father and with his Son, Jesus Christ. And now the big point. We are writing this to you so that our joy may be complete. Wow. That's a non-neutral telling of experiences to the hearers of John's gospel. What is a gospel? A gospel, we know the word gospel comes from an old English word, Godspell. It's from the Evangelion in Greek, which means speaking well or speaking a word that's good. Eu at the beginning of that verb means well or healthy, something that when you hear it, you feel life is easier. You feel like something has entered and sent the shadows away. It's like someone with the ability to say your name like no one else says it. And you just awaken when they say your name. That's like Evangelion, God's spell. But I got to thinking about how spell, as an English word, originally just meant narration. There's the kerygma, telling the story, speech. But it also came to mean like a spell or incantation by which an evil wizard or a witch can cast a spell and bind you. But as C.S. Lewis said, there are two kinds of spells. There are spells that bind and put you under the power of the speaker of the spell. And there are spells that break enchantments. So I like this idea of the gospel of God being a word spoken into our tortured world that snaps us out of our bondage to all these other voices that take hold of our ears and won't let go. Beautiful words, words that cause hope and light to flood in. Don't you long for such voices? Good news. That's how the disciples felt about Jesus whenever he spoke. It always felt like they were changed by it. What did he have? How could he do that? The Gospels are written backwards. So the whole idea of trying to write down came fairly late. So if Jesus dies in 33, the first gospel that was written was after Paul had come and gone. He had already died. So all of his writings have happened, and the letters and all of that. And only around the year 70 did Mark invent this gospel form. It's not a biography. I've tried to describe that. It's a way of telling the story of Jesus in a way that will compel others to experience what Mark also experienced and those who were around him. The Gospels start with the experience of the passion, death, and resurrection. And so the very first stories that were collected had to do with what happened in Jerusalem on that Good Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And then immediately after, when Jesus, the resurrected Lord, walked among his disciples again. That was the story. And so those accounts were the very first things collected. And when it came to writing the gospel, that was what was written first. And only as that story got out there, what we call the passion accounts or the passion narratives, did people justly and predictably want to know, well, how did he ever get there? What happened before that led up to him being murdered and all that happened in Jerusalem? And so it was only then that stories started getting collected about. Do you know anything about him? Like, where did he come from? Do you know his parents? Who else knows any? So it started collecting these stories. And only at the very end did Matthew and Luke come up with birth narratives. So Gospels are written backwards. And in some ways, that makes sense to you and me, because let's say you're going to a bar because you want to meet the person of your dreams. I've never done that, so I don't know what that's about. So I'm just using an example. And you start chatting, someone comes up and they start asking you about your life, and you say some things, but it's only as the relationship is able to sustain something more, do you start going backwards? Like, okay, if this is true, like, where did that come from? What about your parents? And do you have any siblings? And suddenly you're moving backwards. You see how that works? That's how Gospels got written. Mark's Gospel, written around the year 70, Matthew and Luke, somewhere 80 to 90. Gospel of John, the last of the ones we call canonical Gospels, somewhere between 90 and 110. But think how far that is from the year 33. So it was a long collecting of stories, a long thinking about the meaning of Jesus, trying to understand until someone like Mark came up with an idea. Why don't we just gather these stories and try to come up with a form that will help us all pass on the story that we remember, and thus the Gospels. Okay? So I'm going to pause there for a second. That's the digging around to open up us towards what is the masterwork, which is John's Gospel, in particular the Passion account in chapters 18 and 19. So let me check in with you. And Kristen, you can kind of keep an eye out and unmute somebody. You can call them in case there are more than one. You can say, hey, we'll go to that window first. Any questions, anything you want to surface or a thought you have that will enrich our conversation? I'll just pause and let that happen.
Monique, do you want to go?
Monique, welcome.
Yes, thank you. I just have a question. I was documenting the different time frames. So as far as First John, when do you think that might have been written?
We think certainly after the gospel.
So 90 to 120, you said was
No,
John.
110, somewhere in there, the Gospel of John got written. And it could be that those three letters that we have were around that time, but they're clearly after. They are not the
Okay.
same as the Gospel. So somewhere, let's say, all of that between 90 and 110 is our best guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I see Tom has a hand up. Do you want to go?
Yes. Hey, Tom.
Hi, Rick. So this might take you in a direction you don't want to go in, but there's been a lot of interest in the last 20 plus years in the apocryphal gospels,
Yeah, exactly.
Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary.
Yes.
I just wondered if you could say a word about how we came to have four and not more gospels.
All those. Yes. So the literature, the gospel literature, the stories about Jesus, actually beyond our gospels, would fill 2 thick volumes. So there was an enormous looking around. There was a lot of literature that was generated about him. But let me see if I can give you an analogy about why, to answer your question, Tom, why did we end up with just 4 and not all those others? Well, I would answer it this way, by analogizing to experiences you have had. You have heard, because you're fabulous in so many ways, each of you, that you have been able to hear people talk about you in hyperbolic ways. That you might say, well, it's kind of nice, but it's a little embarrassing because it's not all that insightful. I can tell what they're doing. They're showing admiration and they're trying to say, but honestly, it isn't quite like that. You know, a lot of that other literature is hyperbolic in that way. It was kind of Jesus as magician and these different things he did working with his dad in the workshop, and his dad messed up on a cut of a board that he was trying to fit on a table. And the boy Jesus walks up, puts his hand, and the wood grows to the perfect size. Magical. So the early church said, it's kind of cute. It's interesting, but that isn't Jesus. That isn't, even if it were, it isn't what he was about and the way we came to know him. Okay, that's one thread of discernment around all that extra literature. Another is that if you've had this experience too, I think it's easiest to analogize, where someone tries to take who you are and hijack it and use you for their reasons. Your fame or your fabulous talent or whatever it is. And they try to kind of kidnap all of that and apply it to what they're interested in as a way of enhancing what they are interested in and not who you are. It happens a lot. So there's a lot of that literature that's doing that. People with very different philosophies are co-opting Jesus and who he was and say, well, he was really a Platonist, or no, he was really a Gnostic, a certain way of understanding what redemption is that has nothing to do with what Christ was doing. So the co-opting of Jesus for other people's purposes is another reason why a whole bunch of that literature was not included as the literature that we believe is true about Jesus. That doesn't answer it all, Tom, but it gives you a suggestion of the discernment that went on among those who knew Jesus, who passed personally that story to other people. And when they read this stuff, they say, wow, that's just kind of bizarre. Honestly, that's not Jesus. And so it gets collected, because what scholars have done is that even in that strange literature, there are certain little nuggets that actually might have been true about Jesus. And so they pick some of those because that sounds like the Jesus we know. And so it may have been this was a little piece of tradition that got messed up in that literature. and carried forward, and it's a little precious gem. Let me give you an example. I don't know if St. Ignatius got this from any literature. I don't think so. I think he got it out of his own interior sense of what had to have happened, even though it wasn't in the gospel. In the spiritual exercises, he invites a retreatant as the first contemplation of the resurrection to pray about Jesus going and visiting his mom. What son with a mom so faithful to the end and so badly savaged and damaged by what had happened to him and having to watch it? Are you without misunderstanding, Ignatius says, that Jesus wouldn't first of all gone and seen her? It's not canonical. It's not in the gospel. So that's those little nuggets in the tradition that when you read, you say, I wonder if that might be a piece of the true thing. Okay. Good enough, Tom? It just is a suggestion and a really good question. Yeah. Anyone else? Okay. Allow me to tip into the Passion account of John. Remember, the first thing that was written in the Gospels was the Passion account and the resurrection account. Two remarks from some exceptionally good scholars on this content. One says this: a survey of John's Gospel is enough to illustrate. So this is a particular insight of John, which tells us something about him and about the one he loved. John's Gospel is enough to illustrate that the death of Jesus drives the story from start to finish. Of all the Gospels, John gives the most prominent to the strife between Jesus and his opponents. In the first chapter, there are only distant echoes of eventual conflict, but as soon as Jesus begins his public ministry, that conflict breaks out into the open. There is a traditional understanding in John's Gospel, the way he thought about it, is that there were two parts to it, which one great scholar calls the first half the book of signs, were very specific encounters Jesus had that caused this reaction among those who really didn't like what he was doing, were threatened by what he was saying, felt that he was there to overturn everything that their authority and what they taught. John is onto this right from the beginning in his gospel. It's not just that Jesus would eventually die, is that from the moment Jesus, the Son of God, came into the world incarnate, the world convulsed and hatred was brought forward, and it was a strong reaction. John saw that. And if you read his gospel, watch it. Watch how it happens immediately. Every time he does some beautiful work, bang, there's a reaction. He's not interested in just having you notice the conflict. He's trying to tell you that Jesus' death happened over the entire course of his life. It wasn't just a moment. Unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, he says at the end of chapter 12, just before the Passion account starts. That seed that fell into the ground was the moment the Son of God fell into the womb of Mary and began to grow. And that growth was already an encounter with violent opposition. His dying is a thread that runs through the whole gospel. And, as he will say in a couple of points, if you're looking for a Christianity that will assure that you're dazzling, you have perfect skin, you'll have a fortune, live in all the right neighborhoods, being playful, the things of the world, you have no idea who I am. Because my existence brings strife and calls out the part of the world that prefers darkness, not light. He says it flat out to Nicodemus with some dismay. I came as light into the world, but I have found that most people prefer darkness. Wow. To get John's gospel and the way he thought about Jesus, we have to notice this. And it makes for a very rich and different take on how we understand his gospel, his portrait of Jesus, this person he loved with all his heart and who loved him back. A comment from another scholar, and then pause for a second. This scholar says, the Passion of Jesus, the account, progresses in 5 distinct episodes. Jesus' arrest, which isn't just he's arrested. The point is that he's handed over through a betrayal into the power of men. And he let it happen. Act 1, Jesus' arrest. Act 2, his interrogation by Annas, the previous high priest, and then by Caiaphas, the reigning high priest. Act 3, his trial before Pontius Pilate. This is the very heart of the Passion account in John. It is the most beautiful, subtle, brilliant piece of writing. This is his genius at its best when Jesus comes before Pontius Pilate and all that happens. That is the golden center of it as a piece of literature, as a piece of faithful writing. That's Act 3, the trial before Pilate. Act 4, his crucifixion and death. Act 5, his burial. Now, one thing I just want to pause and just ask you to consider. If you wanted to tell the story of your spouse, if you're married, or of someone you truly have loved for a long time, one of the things that immediately strikes you is how impossibly difficult it is to figure out where to start, how to build it, how to tell the story. It's very difficult to know how to sufficiently give an account, to tell the truth, but a truth that only love is able to perceive And therefore, even if it's a hard truth, the telling of it is imbued with love and tenderness for a brokenness in someone you care about, and the courage they have in having to live that darn thing their whole life. How do you structure and organize it? So what John did was he made a very deliberate point to say, of all the things I have never understood about the Christ event and how I experienced it, is why someone so beautiful and filled with so much love, offering us the friendship of God in the way that we have never heard it before. So authentic, so non, here I am, just so humble. Like, how could someone so beautiful spawn so much hatred, such that he was hunted down his whole life until finally we got him? This is that thread. It's a mystery of what God knew about us that we have a hard time knowing about ourselves, about a goodness so beautiful that what God, the insight is that in all of us, there is hidden in us a hatred. If we run into someone that's just a little too good, it's just cuss it. Like, where does that come from? But history's filled with examples of us going after people who are truly beautiful and gifted, and we want them flattened. We want them gone. This is part of what John is trying to, he doesn't understand it. It's the mystery of God, something God knows about us. But he thinks it's very important in the telling of this story about Jesus. Okay? Any comments? And then we're going to, after some comments, then why don't we take our pause at that point? Okay? So anyone, anything that occurs to you, thought you have?
Hi, Rick.
Yes, Carol.
Um,
That's my sister. Hello, Carol.
Hi, it's good to see you today.
Yes, thank you.
I've really struggled with this whole idea of the darkness of the human heart.
Yeah.
And where did it come from? Um, kind of reminds me of what Paul said, that is, I do the things I don't want to do, and I don't do the things that I want to do. And I can really relate to that as a constant battle is why do we do this?
Yeah.
And people say, well, oh, that's original sin, but I've never really understood that tendency to that darkness.
Yeah.
Jesus certainly faced it head on as a soldier, as a conqueror by accepting his death on a cross.
Mhm. There's a word for that, Carol. It's what your comment is basically a biblical lament. That's basically what you're doing, because it's what the tradition has called the mystery of iniquity. Jeremiah the prophet says, how tortuous the ways of the human heart, who can comprehend it? The deep down cussedness in us, but at the same time, a deep down stunning beauty and goodness too. It's just how to figure this out, we don't know. But I would say this in light of John's gospel, Carol, is I think what John saw, and in seeing what John sees, we know him better. Not, and Jesus, whom he loved. What I believe he understood that God was doing in sending his son was to bring a goodness so beautiful and so unbreaking that it would yank out of hiding the darkness in the human heart, force it out into the open, so that we might face it. Or, like many in the gospel, Lord, heal me. Or, remember in Mark's gospel in particular, Jesus just walking into a room and the demonic just went into convulsions, just starts crying out. It can't bear him. It brought it out into the open. Because one of the things about the darkness in the human heart is we're so darn deceptive, self-deceptive. We think we're fine. And it's startling and embarrassing, but it's the right kind of embarrassing when a goodness comes in so unmistakable and we feel this monster in us, whatever that is, kind of come out and want to strike at it. It's suddenly out in the open. And we have to face it or deliberately hide from it again. That would be just one thing I'd say about, I think part of what John saw in Jesus is that every time he came into a scene and acted, the darkness in the space and in the people was yanked right out in the open so it could be seen.
That's right.
It's part of what our sacrament of confession is supposed to be about, that we might go to Mass and be so affected by the beauty of the space, of the kindness of others, we hope, and the sacramental actions, whatever, that we would feel in ourselves something come out that say, I need to go say this before it goes into hiding again. I need to just say it out.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, that kind of precludes feeling that I have when you're talking about this is I'm so not worth it, Lord.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
why did you do this for us?
I know.
So not worth it.
But if we ask that, like I think you're asking it, and I hear it
Yeah.
it's an asking, it's not interrogating God. That's not what you're doing. You're expressing wonder. Like, why? Because God is good, frankly. And we have a ways to go. We're periodically good, sometimes good like God, but most of all, we have to work at it. Anyway, thank you for that, Carol. Appreciate that. Any other comment before we take our break? Yeah, Barb.
I was just wondering if you think there is a deep pattern in human history. When luminaries, whatever sort of station
Yeah.
they occupy, the prophets or those who the great religions have been formed around,
Yeah.
like Muhammad too.
Sure, all of them.
Is
Yeah.
this the pattern? Is this the pattern? There's a cleavage between the light and the dark.
Yeah, because that runs through us, our own souls. But the most, let me just finish with this thought. as a riff off what you said. There have been several times in my life where I needed the desert. I don't know why I needed the desert. I needed the desert. So I got in a car and I drove out as far as I could into a desert and planted myself there, usually at a monastery, and just put myself in the bleakness of that space and kept myself there for 8 or 10 days until I knew, why did I need the desert? What am I doing out here? And each time, one of the things that occurred to me was the desert is so swept clean of distraction. It's so spare out there that the thing that is most striking is the intense clarity between bright light of sun and the darkness of the shadows. It's just so clear. And I think when we get interiorly complicated, there's something about the desert that just clarifies. The light matters. And the darkness sits there. The brighter the light, the darker the shadow gets. There's something in that space that helped me simplify, decomplexify, and just say, I want the light. I don't want that other thing. Yeah. Anyway, let me turn it back to you, Kristen, and you can send us towards our martinis or extra veal cutlet or whatever it is you want to send us to.
Both of those sound great.
Yeah, pretty good.
All right, we're gonna take just a short 7-ish minute break. So if you need to get up, move your body, find the bathroom, refill your beverage, we'll be here just having a light chat, and I will regroup us when it's time in a few minutes.
Thank you, Kristen. Perfect. And I'll just hang out here. Hey, Richard, nice to see you.
You need to unmute yourself if you want to chat.
Good. Good to see you, Rick. Thank you.
The way the light is hitting you, I was thinking of the light, there's a light band that goes straight down through your face.
So I'm in my study and the shade is dropped because it looks west.
Yes, of course. I figured.
Shade, but there's little hole perforations in the shade where the string runs through it. And so
Yeah.
dots that are going across.
That's the pattern.
Move over here and I'm dot
Oh,
free.
no, it's just fine. It's just kind
So
of.
Rick, I've got this is a weird comment, but it jumped into my mind as you were talking about the really the heart of the passion was the interview with Pilate.
Yeah.
And I've got my grandmother's Bible in front of me. I'm reading the King James words that are old words and it jumped into my mind how true what you say. This is really the essence. I'm not of this world. My kingdom is not of this world. These words are words that we base our life on.
Yes.
And then my rational mind turns around and asks the question, how could they have known what was said? Does that ever bother you?
Yeah, it does. I hold that lightly because one of the things we do not understand and never will, because we live in a written culture with books and screens and information coming in that way, we have no comprehension of how accurately people remembered things, how powerful their memories were, that they would literally memorize the whole Bible. You kind of go, that is so beyond us. We squawk if we have to memorize a poem, and they memorize whole books. So the accuracy, how things were reported, how it got out. What was he saying up there? People were asking. They saw some sort of encounter. Maybe there was, I would imagine the soldiers were near and could hear. So the word got out. That's what he talked about. He said that? Really? He didn't say anything? Or what did he mean by that? And how completely and accurately people remembered is beyond us in our contemporary culture. We have no idea that kind of power.
Yeah.
It's too bad, but I think that's the answer. Yeah. Yes, Carol, why don't you unmute yourself so I can hear you? There you are. Good to see you, Carol.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess, and regarding the last point here, I think Indigenous people have always trusted oral history
That's
and can
right.
quite comfortably say long before recorded time, this happened. And it's interesting that non-Indigenous people don't seem to be able to grasp that. We tend to believe that only the written word at the time has actual validity. And so I think, in a way, when I think about light and darkness, I think we've got to kind of turn on the light as far as those sorts of things go and find ways. But also, I guess I'm thinking a lot about darkness and light right now because I feel a lot of darkness in the world.
Yeah.
And I just worry that people can maybe accept the darkness within themselves. And that's all right. We can say, oh, yeah, it's true. We're really not so great. But what are we doing with that in terms of bringing light? That still seems to me a really, you know, we don't have our little candles in our little corners shining bright lights very much. It's more, there's more awareness of darkness. I just wondered if you had any comments about that.
Well, first of all, great comment about orality. That's right. And when we think of the gospel, the first one wasn't even written till 40 years after Jesus died. All of that time was this incredible power of remembering exactly the stories as they were told originally and are passed on accurately in the oral tradition. We just have no concept of the integrity of that, you know? So good comment there. In terms of the darkness, one thing to at least consider, Carol, is we assume that this is doom and darkness, day of wrath coming upon us in all these signs that you say, I'm just feeling a lot of darkness right now. I'm not denying it, and I know those feelings and the fierceness I feel through things like what we're doing tonight, these defiant acts of reaching for light and depth, reaching for God together. The holy defiance of this is very important. But I would say, what if, just what if, in light of John's gospel, that the reason we're experiencing the rising of the dark is that God is coming close and the world is reacting. The part that hates the light.
Mm.
And that's why it's coming out. We have to at least consider that possibility because in the Gospels, Mark is particularly stark, but it shows up in John all the way through. It's because the light had come into the world that the darkness came out and we saw its works. And we're getting lots of examples of people preferring the dark rather than the light. And we're seeing exactly how it works and what it does to people. Well, evil doesn't like to be seen like that. It likes to be more hidden. So it's right out in the open. At least we might, as Christians, grounded in hope, consider the possibility that what if God is actually coming close? And it's up to us as Christians, as best we can, not to fall for the dark narrative, but look where God is close somewhere here. It wouldn't be so obvious if the goodness weren't near. You see what I'm saying? It's just a thought. And that's what you asked for. You said, do you have any thought? That's a thought. Okay.
Yeah, but that's helpful. And yeah, I think it requires us then to really see if there are reactions then further to the darkness, but to be looking for it, and doing what needs to be done.
Exactly.
But anyway, thank you if that's helpful.
You're welcome, Carol. Thanks for your comment.
Father Yan,
Speak.
Anne here.
Hello, Ann.
Hi. Why does John refer to him as the one Jesus loves the most?
Well, we don't know. So I'll answer that. There's been a long, long scholarship about who is the beloved disciple. Is it John the Evangelist, or is it one of his followers? Another one from the Johannine Church. It's exhaustive how many studies have been done on this very thing. But let me offer you this analogy as a kind of answer. It might be the highest pride of your or my life at the end of my life to be able to summarize my life is I was beloved by my spouse and my children. That might be one of the highest and most beautiful things that you might say out of any credential or anything I've ever done. The ones I most wanted to hold me dear did. I think that's what that title means. And I have always appreciated the possibility that that is John of the Evangelist, who really could say nothing better. Like my sister Carol was saying, I don't deserve any of this. Why would God do this for me? John knew that too. And he said, but my highest title is I'm one who was beloved by Jesus. I think it's something like that. I just offer that. Kristen, back to you.
Thank you.
Ask a quick question, Father Gans, before you continue.
Sure.
I was just wondering, given John was at the foot of the cross and Jesus looked down and said, you know, this is your, like, here's your brother, this is your mother, and like he was right there. And so I always felt it's probably something I made up, of course, but I always thought that's why John was the one that Jesus loved, because he was right there at the foot of the cross with his mother. And yeah, that was just a thought.
Be careful when you say, Monique, about, well, I just dreamed this up. Because remember that God works in the powers of soul, and one of them is in our imagination.
Hmm.
God can appeal and present a thought so beautiful that we end up clinging to it all our life in a certain way. And we just hold on to that. And we know that God has us somehow in there. But we would never want to go on to the scholarly journal and present a paper that God said this is. It's not about that. God got through to you in this beautiful imagination. And that should be enough. Dwell in it. You know, you know. Well, are we all back?
I hope so. This is the official. Oh, there's another hand wave. Do you want to take another question?
Gosh, I don't want to ever have Gary talk. I mean, really. No, go ahead, Gary. Go ahead and make it.
Well, I don't want to intrude into your last little portion here, but something just really struck me when you were speaking with Carol a little while ago about the light and the dark, because in my mind, I thought, what if we flip this? What if the idea of the darkness is pulled out because of the immensity of the light, which was your point and your theme? What about another way of looking at it, that once the darkness comes out, the vividness of the love of those who love God becomes really apparent. And as dark as the world may appear, there are sources of joy and hope that are a little bit more obscured in times when the harshness of evil isn't as explicit. Just a thought.
See, it always cracks me up with Gary. He just says, well, just this little thought, and it's always worth listening to. So thank you.
Well, I didn't want to interrupt your end of your time today.
But you're on to John's insight. So here's one little riff. It wasn't exactly what you said, but a riff on what you said, that how devastating it is that when the light comes and the evil in the world comes out, it convulses. And those who have no interest in God, no interest, I hate to put it that way, it's a very harsh thing to say, but it's as Jesus himself said. Unfortunately, many prefer darkness. It's what they prefer. What is particularly heartbreaking is that the children of the light, and this is not an arrogant, gee, look at me. No, we all have a brokenness, but at least we're trying to serve God as best we can. Why, when the darkness come out, do we react in an ugly way, in a way that's more like the darkness acts, instead of being remarkably, incandescently different than that?
Mhm.
Love is gentle, love is kind, love is patient, love, all those things Paul says. Why doesn't that, for us who try to be even more committed to being like that, instead of getting ugly and hating the people who are wrecking everything? You see what I'm saying? It's just a, as we're doing a lot of that tonight, it's just a thought. But anyway.
Yeah, I guess just to follow up briefly, the point that I was thinking about of the vividness of the beauty of things. I mean, I see people who have never really thought much, for example, about how despised and trodden underfoot immigrants are constantly experiencing life in this country and have across the ages. And now there are people who are saying, this person who cuts my lawn, who comes from Mexico, who is a lovely person, who sort of pushes my check away when I come out to pay him. I mean, there's beauty here that I didn't notice before. And the harshness of him being singled out as not belonging, that just is not going to work for me anymore. So there's I think maybe a social and a spiritual growth that comes from the outburst of hatred that we see around us in different ways.
Yeah. And I love how you just did that, not moving in a political mode, but staying within this gospel pattern of there is a convulsion of battle between the light and the darkness in the way we behave with each other. And it can become very apparent. This is only secondarily a political thing. This is about character and about what is in the human heart and whom do we choose to be. It's like that. And you did that very beautifully because you kept it in that vein. Away from
That's right. I'm
politics.
not being political here. I'm just about the heart.
No.
It's all about the world of the heart.
Yeah. And what's happening there. Well, let us do this. Thank you for the richness of the comments. And but what if we join me in going right to the Passion account? And if you have your Bible, unless you've memorized it, and you can just do it that way and kind of go, wow, you are amazing. And go to chapter 18 and let us come from the arrest, where again in John, one of the things that will strike you about the genius and the brilliance of this gospel passion account, I don't know how he does it. I really don't. How is he able to write about things so intensely ugly in the human heart and what it does to people, especially when they're defenseless? Why, especially when they're defenseless, does the rage come out even more? You'd think Like, why? So he writes about really harsh things. And yet, this is the thing that's so startling. What he is able to convey is the sovereign power of Christ, who knows exactly what he's doing. He is in charge of every step of the way. There's nothing that is forced on him that he hasn't already given himself to. You cannot take my world from me. It's beyond your power. No, you can't arrest me because I'm freely giving myself to you. He's overturning. So how can we read a passion filled with ugliness, and what comes through is this growing sense of the power of God walking right into the heart of darkness, knowing exactly why his Father wants him there, with every intention of completely wrecking what darkness wants to do to people. It's an astonishing accomplishment that he's able to get us to notice that. We in our culture, and Carol, you were saying a little bit of it, the dark narrative is so powerful that we can just end up seeing it in a way that's not healthy for us, and we lose the light, or the light goes out of our eyes. And so for that gift of John to be able to see the sovereign power of God working in the darkest that humans can throw at him is astonishing. Okay, so he is arrested. He's taken to the religious authorities. They clearly, number one, don't understand him. Number two, they don't want to. He doesn't fit. They haven't liked him from the beginning. They fought him all the way along. They just aren't going to get it. This is a major theme of John's insight, and it's a lament. Why, with a truth so beautiful that we experienced, heard, and saw, did it so enrage a lot of us instead of bless us? Why? It's the mystery of iniquity that the light brings out into the open. So Jesus knows that they aren't going to listen to him, so he really doesn't say anything. Why talk? Anything he says. And when they say, justify yourself, he says, I've openly said everything. Why don't you ask all those who've been listening to me? And the response is for the soldier to smack him across the face and say, how dare you talk to your superior? You're better in this way. You see what I'm saying? So he just shuts up. But now he's going to be brought to Pilate. And this gets us to the central drama in John's insight. What Pontius Pilate represents is the presence of a world-dominating power so capable that it can control vast swaths of the world as they knew it, just dominate it. That's a human endeavor. God created the whole world and holds the whole world, but God does not dominate the world. He just doesn't do it like that. So when Jesus comes before Pilate, he's coming before the engine of darkness to speak in spiritual terms. Of course there were good Romans. Of course there were good people. You know what I'm saying? We're talking about the engine, the institutionalized domination that is something very human that comes up over and over again and eventually it crashes, and another system comes up, an engine to try to dominate again. It just over and over again. We're all old enough to have run into that enough to know how true it is. But for John to have Jesus come before Pilate in some ways is to come before the central drama of the whole cosmos. That energy that wants to dominate and control versus God who in friendship comes and gives himself, God who gave himself to us in the moment of creation, who sustains us through the Holy Spirit, through every plant that continues to grow and give us sustenance, through animals that we love, whose lives are given so that we can live. So much. It's the two worlds in direct conflict is what Jesus standing before Pilate represents in John's gospel. This is the great moment of encounter. And that's why the writing is so brilliant. So what if we just read a little bit here? No, yes, we have 10 minutes. So Kristen, you'll just do this and make all sorts of ugly faces as we're getting close. So I know we're getting close because we always stick to our time. So if we go to Jesus before Pilate in John 18, starting at verse 28, then it's not that Jesus went to see Pilate, they took him. So the whole religious engine has rejected him, has no interest in what he's doing. They take him. From Caiaphas to Pilate's headquarters, it was early in the morning. Sneaky, before anyone is up. Sneak him across town and get him to Pilate. They themselves did not enter the headquarters so as to avoid ritual defilement and to be able to eat the Passover. Do you hear the levels of conflict here? It's just the darkness has come right out into the open. They're trying to do this murder correctly so that they can properly, without stain, have a good Passover. Like, wow, all too human, isn't it? The goal of the gospel is not for us to take sides and go, those bastards, sorry, whatever. It's not, it's for us to reflect on how tortuous the ways of the human heart. Who can comprehend it? It's supposed to help us all understand, all of us, in the drama that we are. We're complicated. So Pilate went out to them, and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" It's the first time since the arrest that we think someone's asked a genuinely honest question, who might actually want an answer. What accusation do you bring against this man? They answered, "If this man were not a criminal, we would not have handed him over to you." Did they answer the question? No. They completely avoided it. This is the genius of John. This is him at his highest powers, where we could say clearly an inspired author, because the textures of evil and duplicity that Jesus presents as pure light and goodness is calling out into the open is quite devastating. And if we read it with any honesty, it will make us uncomfortable because we do this stuff. It's kind of uncomfortable. It's supposed to be. Pilate said to them, "Well, then take him yourselves and judge him according to your law." The Jews replied, "We are not permitted to put anyone to death." In other words, we're law abiders. So we're good. This was to fulfill what Jesus had said when he indicated the kind of death he was to die. Okay. I leave that as Kristen gives me the sign that my death is imminent. I hope it teases you enough to, at least when you have a chance, go to this section and slow read it and watch exactly how Jesus works in this space where he, in God's way of doing world domination, if you will, is so different than the way the world does it. And how this clash that is building through the entire gospel comes together in this moment. And we hear the voice of a man confused, not sure what's happening, say, "What is truth? I do not know what the truth is." Wow. Kind of stern for us in these days to hear something like that. Give me a moment. Let me pause for a second. What wondrous love is this, O my soul, O my soul? What wondrous love is this, O my soul? What wondrous love is this that caused the Lord of bliss to knee, whatever, for my soul, for my soul. Knee, for my soul. Amen. Back to you, Kristen.
Thank you so much. A little surprising musical ending. That was amazing.
It's like the Persian rug. You have to leave an imperfection in there. Otherwise, you might think, gosh, he actually knows what he's doing.
You too. That was really
Beautiful
wonderful.
song, Rick.
Mhm.
I love
Beautiful
that.
song.
So thank you everyone for being here. It was a privilege to be among you. And I just really loved seeing the gospel, how you explained that it was written from this passionate place was really, really an interesting place. I hadn't really realized that before. If you also enjoyed your time, which I'm sure you did, and someone popped into your mind while here, please extend invitations to friends and family to come for next time.
Hey, nice icon. Yeah.
Also, we greatly appreciate all the financial support. The Faber and these nights wouldn't even exist if it weren't for all of us giving financially. So as always, you can donate on the website or get in touch with Amy. And tomorrow, an email should go out with the notes and the video link if you want to revisit then. And just thank you so much for joining us and have a great rest of your week. Hope to see you next time.
Your favor has come too. The most distinguished member of our board. Honestly.
There it is.
I love that. Thank you, Richard.
Love you, Rick.
Thank
Love you
you
guys.
so much.
Thank you.
And Kristen, you did a beautiful job.
Yes.
Thanks
Oh,
for being
it's so fun to be here. Thank you for asking me.
Thank
here.
you.
Good to see
Thank
you,
you.
Fran. Say hi to Omaha.
Okay.
Thanks, Father Rick.
Yes. See you
Good
guys.
night.
Okay.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank
Great
you
to
for
be
a
with
great
you
night.
guys. Hey, Steve.